I was still limping from surgery when my son barred me from my own front door. The afternoon sun flared in the window panes of the house. My husband and I had restored board by board, and in that glitter, I heard Richard's voice flatten into something I'd never heard before. Everything changed while you were in the hospital. This house is no longer yours. Find somewhere else to live. The words landed like a blow to the hip the doctors had just rebuilt. I stared at the roses I had planted 30 years earlier, at the emerald earrings on my daughter-in-law's ears. Mine a gift from Anthony for our 25th, and felt the world tilt. No tears came, only a hard, slow cold rising from the soles of my feet to my throat. For 21 days, I'd battled fever and infection after what was supposed to be a straightforward procedure. I had pictured the moment of returning home the way a child pictures summer soft and inevitable. Instead, I met Veronica's brittle smile and my son's closed stance. She announced my belongings were boxed in the garage and could be shipped wherever I planned to disappear. Behind them stood her parents, Raymond and Claudia Sterling, as composed as realtors at an open house. Papers had been signed, they said smoothly. Power of attorney. I remembered the packet Richard brought to my hospital room, the pages I initialed with an IV in my arm, trusting the boy I'd taught to drive and to keep his word. In that doorway, I understood I hadn't signed for help. I'd signed an invitation to a robbery. I turned away before my legs gave out. The driver who'd brought me from the hospital had waited. I climbed back in and told him to go anywhere. In the rattling dark of the cab, I texted a single message to the one person I knew would believe me without question, Plan B. Gloria Evans met me an hour later at a modest downtown hotel with a file case and a look that could strip paint. We had been friends since college, me into bank compliance, her into law, and after Anthony died, she'd insisted we weave legal steel through my affairs. Trusts, safeguards, redundancies. I had humored her, half thinking it paranoia. As she spread documents across the little desk under the hotel lamp, I realized her caution might save my life. The trust was real and tight, she assured me. The house could not lawfully move without multiple signatures, mine included. But on the investment statements, she had pulled 5 transfers blinked like sirens, large sums pushed out during my hospitalization to accounts neither of us recognized authorized by digital signatures, supposedly mine. Over $220,000 gone while I lay sedated. When she mentioned the Sterling's checkered history in Dallas, complaints that vanished, mortgage companies that collapsed under investigations, I felt a second rupture beneath the first. This wasn't family squabbling. This was a scheme. I lay awake that night and listened to the hotel air conditioner sigh. Memories marched by Richard's childhood insistence that every game be fair, the day he found a wallet, and we drove it to the address on the license, the earnest young man leaving for college at dawn with a thermos of my coffee, and Anthony's old watch ticking on his wrist. Somewhere between then and now, something precious had been traded for a cheaper metal. The thought was a physical ache. Yet as the hours turned, grief hardened into something serviceable. I wasn't helpless. I knew system signatures, the hair-thin lines where malfeasance hides. I would follow the trail until it led me to the truth, even if the truth carried my son's face. By morning, we were working in concert the way we had in younger years. Gloria on the legal angles, me on the financial. Property records showed new names cropping up like weeds on my block. Sterling Investment Properties, LLC, buying houses from neighbors who had lived there since the 80s. A zoning request filed while I was still in the ICU sought to convert our street from single-family to mixed use. If they controlled enough parcels, if the city nodded at the change, the land value would soar, and the profits would be counted in 8 figures. I could almost hear Raymond's voice at a glossy boardroom table. Nothing personal, just a deal. But deals built on forged signatures and stolen identities were crimes, and I still knew how to speak the language of evidence. That afternoon, Richard texted using the tone of a busy manager. "We need your passwords to transfer remaining funds for your care. Send today." I set the phone face down and refused to answer. The old me, the mother who smoothed trouble and reached for peace like a reflex, would have replied within minutes. The woman in that hotel suite, braced on a cane, and a lifetime of training, let the silence do the talking. If they thought I was beaten, let them. People who underestimate you leave doors ajar. Gloria's contacts at the bureau were interested the moment they saw the pattern. We would need more than irregular transfers and neighborhood deeds to dismantle what the Sterlings were building, the agent said. We would need admissions documents, something that stitched my stolen credentials to their acquisitions in a way no lawyer could unpick. I told them I knew where that proof would be. My study had always been the heart of the house, the place Anthony balanced the checkbook, and I corrected loan files late into the night. Men like Raymond could not resist a desk like Anthony's, the weighty wood, the drawers that glided open as if greased with history. If anyone bragged, it would be there. We set a day and an hour chosen for Veronica's salon appointment, and the precise moment Richard would still be at work. I dressed in a gray pantsuit that made me feel like myself and tucked my phone in my jacket pocket with a simple recording app and a panic button linked to the agents waiting 2 streets away. As the taxi rolled past the oak tree whose branches once held Richard's treehouse, my hands shook for the first time since I had been turned away. I told them to stop. A breath. Another. Then I stepped out, circled to the side door my son once used to sneak home after curfew, and let myself into the house that on paper and in every line of memory was still mine. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon cleanser and someone else's perfume, a scent that didn't belong to my life. I moved slowly past the island where Anthony and I used to read the paper at 7:15 a.m. My cane an alibi for nerves and a useful reminder to my body to take small steps. Voices rose from the study, male, brisk, self-satisfied, and I paused in the shadow of the doorway, my thumb sliding the recording app to life. Raymond's baritone carried like a radio host. "The closing with the Millers is Friday at 4:00 p.m. Once that funds, we control 40% of the block." His companion asked about the Hendersons, and Raymond said what I had come for as if he were reading a lunch order. "We used Mrs. Hayes's banking credentials." Clean as a whistle. I pushed the door wider and let the light fall across me. My study had been rearranged like a stage set. Anthony's desk turned to face the door as if we were interviewing applicants. Raymond stood behind it in a navy blazer I recognized from a picture on Veronica's mantel, the one where he accepted an industry award with his hand on a podium and his eyes on the camera. Surprise rippled across his features. Then the practiced smile returned, and he came around the desk as if to welcome a wayward guest. "This is unexpected, Isabella. How did you get in through the door?" was the only answer I gave, and I crossed to the filing cabinet, where our mortgage sat in a cream folder with Anthony's tight script on the tab. I didn't need the paper in my hand. I needed what I already had on my phone. His partner shifted, a restless man with an expensive watch and a conscience he hadn't fully trained to sleep. I said I'd come to collect personal papers. Raymond said the property was no longer mine and made a show of concern about my recent hospitalization, as if he were auditioning for empathy. I told him I'd heard the Henderson comment. He told me I was confused. I said my mind had never been clearer. And then the mask, the one he wore for investors and city councils, slipped. "Give me the phone," he said in a low voice that had no silk in it. When I moved for the door, he grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into the soft place where a bruise blooms fast. The jolt sent a white flare through my hip, and the cane clattered against the rug. "Give it to me, or you don't walk out." The front door burst open like a cue line snapped. Agents filled the hall with calm commands, hands briefly on holsters, voices steady. FBI. Hands where we can see them. The partner's watch flashed as his arms rose. Raymond released me with a backward step, calculating how fast a story might pivot in his favor. Agent Rips guided me aside and asked if I was all right. I nodded, breath thin, but even, and lifted the phone with the tiny red waveform on the screen. "I think you'll want this," I said. And for the first time since the hospital, I felt the old professional cool return, that clean line between problem and proof. We spent the rest of the afternoon under fluorescent lights in a federal building that could have been any federal building in any city, beige and humming and efficient. I gave my statement twice, once for the agents and once for the recorder that would transcribe every syllable into a transcript a defense attorney would later pore over. The emergency order to freeze transactions related to my house went out by 6:10 p.m. My accounts locked behind new multi-factor gates by 6:30 p.m. Search warrants were already en route to a judge's chambers. In the middle of it all, a thought kept looping like a thread I was afraid to pull. Richard. He would walk into the house after work to find his wife pale and furious, his in-laws unreachable strangers, cataloging hard drives and file boxes. Would he look for me? Blame me? Understand? I didn't have to wait long to learn. Shortly after 8:00 p.m., we parked across the street as the agents formed again and moved toward my front steps. Veronica opened the door in a sheath dress the color of a bruise, her hair fresh from a salon blowout, her smile shattering when she saw the jackets with 3 letters. Richard appeared behind her tie, loosened the face of a man who thought he had time to fix small messes and had just been introduced to a large one. His eyes found mine over Agent Callahan's shoulder and widened not with love or even anger, but with the shock of a person realizing the board has been reset without his permission. The agents announced the warrant and the scope of the search. Veronica demanded a lawyer. Richard demanded an explanation from me, and then from them, and then from thin air. I said what needed saying, no more. Your father's desk was the scene of a confession today. The Bureau has the recording. They have the transfers. They have the deeds. He shook his head, as if that might rattle the facts loose. It's a misunderstanding, Mom. We were securing your future. I looked at the boxes labeled with my handwriting, the ones they'd left in the garage when they told me to find somewhere else to live, and chose the calm that had carried me this far. You were securing my disappearance. When they led Veronica to a car, she twisted enough to throw spite like a pebble. You think you've won? You have no idea who my father knows. Your father is in a holding cell, I said, because Agent Rips had told me, and because walking through my own door with my spine straight depended on saying true things aloud. The neighborhood had gathered in small constellations along the sidewalk. Arms-folded phones lifted the hum of a story beginning to travel. Richard stood alone on the porch while evidence techs moved past him with gray crates and labeled bags. The porch light threw a weary circle around him, and the boy who used to fall asleep against my shoulder during thunderstorms flickered through the man like a ghost. Where am I supposed to go now? He asked the air. I didn't answer. There are questions only time knows how to meet. Back in the interview room, the agents laid out next steps like a chess line. Raymond in federal custody, Claudia to be picked up in Dallas. Veronica arraigned in the morning warrants, executed at their offices, emails to be pulled from servers that thought they were secure. They cautioned me that the process would be long and sometimes ugly. I told them I'd spent a career in long and ugly. Later, when the building had gone quiet and the vending machines were the loudest voices on the floor, Agent Rips brought in a thin folder with a paperclip shining at the top. We found something in Dallas, she said, and slid the photographs across to me. My ICU room captured at night from a single furtive angle, followed by copies of my charts bearing a hand that was not my doctor's. followed by a bank of calls between Veronica's father and a nurse whose name I would come to know too well. The ground moved under the chair. They hadn't only stolen time and paper, they had reached gloved hands into my veins. I asked one question very softly. Does my son know? Rips said they didn't think so, not from what they had so far. But we would see. I stared at the bland wall that had listened to so many confessions and bargains and lies, and I decided I would look into Richard's eyes when he learned how far the Sterlings had gone. Whatever remained between us would be forged or finished there. For now, I sat very still and let the photographs cool under my fingertips. Somewhere in the chain of that night, a nurse had altered a dosage, a calendar had shifted, and a window had opened wide enough for criminals to move furniture through it. The door below it had closed again, and I was still here. That would have to be enough until morning. Richard sat across from me in the federal interview room, pale under the white lights, his shirt collar limp where confidence used to be. His lawyer spoke first, but I barely heard him. I was studying the lines on my son's face, trying to match them to the boy who once promised he'd take care of me when I was old. I didn't know they'd gone that far, Richard said. Veronica handled everything loans paperwork, even the insurance. I thought I was fixing what I'd broken. His voice cracked on the last word. You broke more than money, I told him quietly. You broke trust. He nodded, shame softening his expression. I know, Mom. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just needed you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. Agent Rips entered then, holding a new folder, her tone tight with urgency. Mrs. Hayes, we need a moment. Gloria and I followed her to a small conference room where she spread out photographs like cards, in a grim tarot reading images of me unconscious in a hospital bed and documents bearing forged handwriting. These were found in Raymond Sterling's office, she said. And we've confirmed a nurse altered your medication dosage. My body went cold. Gloria's voice was steady but low. You're saying they may have deliberately prolonged her recovery? Rips nodded. To buy time to complete their property purchases. The horror settled over me slowly, like frost creeping across glass. Does Richard know? I asked. We don't think so, Rips said. But there's also an insurance policy in your name taken out 6 months ago with him listed as beneficiary. The room tilted. My heart clenched at the thought that my son could have known about a policy that might have turned my death into profit. I need to see him, I said. I'll know the truth when I look in his eyes. When they brought me back, Richard looked confused by the interruption. Rips laid the photographs before him and explained what had been found. His face drained of color. What no, Veronica said she was updating our policies. I never... He pressed his hands to his forehead. Oh God. The raw anguish in his voice was unmistakable. For all his cowardice and greed, this was not an act. You realize what this means? I said softly. Your wife and her parents could have killed me? He began to cry quietly, the sound more shocking than all the shouting I had endured these weeks. What have I done? What have I allowed? That was the moment I saw a flicker of the boy I had raised, the one who once hated seeing anyone in pain. Then make it right, I told him. Tell them everything. He lifted his head. I will, he said. Every detail. 2 weeks later, the scope of the Sterling operation lay sprawled across the FBI's evidence tables. 17 properties acquired through fraud, manipulated appraisals, and stolen funds. The nurse Miranda Jenkins confessed to adjusting my medication and introducing bacteria to prolong my hospitalization. She insisted she hadn't meant to kill me, only to delay my discharge. The words chilled me more than if she'd admitted to murder. Veronica had planned every step: text messages, revealing questions about my vitals, discharge timeline, and the financial progress of their acquisitions. They hadn't just stolen my money, they had plotted to erase me. By then, Richard's cooperation had become critical. His confession tied the entire conspiracy together, granting prosecutors the leverage they needed. He was spared the worst charges, but still faced prison. When the agents asked if I wanted to be present for his sentencing, I agreed. Sitting behind him in court, I watched the judge pronounce a 5-year term reduced for cooperation. I didn't cry. There were no tears left for that. Veronica and her parents faced decades, and even that felt inadequate for what they had done. When the investigation concluded, the agents told me I could return home. I hesitated at the door, the key heavy in my hand. Inside, everything looked familiar, but wrong, like a stage set meant to resemble my life. The furniture was in place, but the air was colder. My clothes were gone from the closet, my jewelry replaced with empty velvet boxes. Even the curtains had changed. But it was still my house. I walked room to room, whispering to Anthony's memory, promising him I'd make this place whole again. They thought they could erase us, I said aloud. But they forgot who built this home. That night, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea, the garden still bruised from neglect. I watched the roses struggle against weeds, small green shoots reaching through cracked soil. They were stubborn, resilient. I decided to be the same. Tomorrow would bring lawyers' repairs and paperwork, but tonight I simply existed back where I belonged. The air felt cleaner, the stars sharper. I had survived their cruelty. That would have to be enough. The morning of my final visit with Richard dawned pale and quiet. I dressed simply, no jewelry, no perfume, just the steady rhythm of purpose in my chest. The detention center smelled of disinfectant and resignation. Richard sat at a table under the fluorescent light, thinner than before, his eyes ringed by sleepless nights. "Thank you for coming," he said. I nodded and sat across from him. "They told me what Veronica and her parents did at the hospital," he continued, his voice shaking. I swear I didn't know. I studied him for a long moment. I believe that I said, finally, "You didn't know they would risk my life, but you did know they were taking everything else." He lowered his head. Yes. The silence between us was thick but not empty. It was filled with everything we had been through: birthdays, scraped knees, college graduations, the years after Anthony's death, when Richard had been my anchor. I could feel the distance between that boy and this man, like a physical wound. "Why?" I asked softly. "Why betray the values your father and I gave you?" His voice cracked as he answered. "Because I was weak. I lost money, made bad investments, and was too proud to tell you. Veronica's father offered help, and I took it. Then I kept taking until I couldn't stop. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd make it right. But I didn't. I just kept sinking." He gave a bitter laugh. "I thought I was protecting you from worry. Instead, I destroyed everything. I wanted to be angry, but the anger had burned itself to ash months ago. What was left was sorrow, heavy, human, inescapable. The prosecutors offered me a plea deal," he said. 5 years, maybe 3, with good behavior. I'm going to take it. It's more mercy than I deserve." I reached into my bag and pulled out a worn envelope. "Your father left this for you before he died. I think now is the time." Richard's hand trembled as he unfolded the letter. I watched his face as he read grief, regret, and then a flicker of something softer. When he finished, he pressed the letter to his chest. "He said he was proud of me," he whispered, "that I still had time to live an honest life." "You do," I said quietly, "if you choose to." He looked at me with eyes raw from crying. Will you ever forgive me? Forgiveness isn't a door you walk through once, I told him. It's a path you keep choosing, even when it hurts. Right now, I'm still on that path. But you're still my son, and that means there's hope. He nodded, accepting the truth like a sentence, and a mercy all at once. When the guard came to escort him away, Richard hesitated. Are you going to stay in the house? He asked. Yes, I said. Your father built it, and I won't abandon it again. He gave a small, almost peaceful smile. Good, he'd like that. 6 months passed. The house, once cold and violated, slowly became home again. Gloria helped me restore it piece by piece, and the garden returned to life defiant and bright. The FBI returned my jewelry and documents. The court sentenced the Sterlings 20 years for Raymond, 15, for Claudia, 18, for Veronica. The nurse received 8 for her part in my prolonged suffering. Justice, imperfect, but real. My neighbors, once wary and quiet, now rallied together. We formed a senior protection group teaching others to guard against scams. The block that had nearly been sold to greed had found its soul again. One afternoon, as Gloria hung the last family photo on the wall, she asked if I'd answered Richard's latest letter. I hadn't. Each week he wrote, never begging for forgiveness, only describing the small changes he was making, teaching literacy to inmates tending the prison garden, studying ethics. His words felt like seedlings pushing through the wreckage of who he used to be. I will, I told her. Not yet, but I will. That night, I dreamed of Anthony. We sat on the old porch swing as the sun set behind the roses. Healing doesn't mean forgetting, he said. It means finding purpose in the scar. I woke with tears on my face and a strange calm in my chest. The next day, I called Gloria. I've decided, I said. I'm expanding the foundation. Anthony's medical research foundation, once devoted solely to his illness, would now include a new branch advocating for elder rights, preventing fraud, and providing free legal support to victims like me. Gloria smiled when I told her. That's how you heal, Isabella, she said. By turning pain into protection. As months unfolded into a softer rhythm, I found myself surrounded not by loss, but by renewal neighbors who brought flowers, community members who asked for advice, volunteers eager to help the cause. My house was alive again, with conversation, with laughter, with the steady hum of purpose. One evening, I sat at Anthony's desk, the same one where Raymond once plotted my ruin, and watched the garden glow in the fading light. The roses had bloomed twice that year. I thought of Richard, of Veronica, behind bars, of the countless people still vulnerable to betrayal. My story wasn't just survival. It was testimony. Some betrayals cut so deep, they change your very shape. But with time and courage, even scars can bloom into something new. If this story touched your heart, share it so others may find strength too. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, do you believe forgiveness can ever truly heal betrayal?